Hello, this is Jeffrey W. Ingram with the World Builders Anvil, and I'd like to thank you all so much for making my show in the new and noteworthy for iTunes in just the first weekend. My show's not been out for a week. I am very ecstatic and elated that you would listen to my show, and I appreciate the feedback I've gotten so far. There will be some format changes coming out of this. Please go to the show notes page on Gardul.com. It is under the podcasting section. World Builders Anvil. Look up the episode number 6. There's a special graphic just for you guys for listening to this show. That is Gardul.com, Gardul.com. And now, the show. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Hello, my name is Jeff Ingram, and welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I am your host, and let's get right into it this week. This week we are going into what I call the Makeover Session. This is something I like to do with my world probably once a quarter. Go over my world, what am I doing, what are the rules, and we'll get into the specifics of what I do for a second. So if you have a world and you don't have these all written down in one spot, this is a good opportunity to go over your world rules and have your own makeover section, or have your world creation session if this is the first world you've tried to create. And we'll start with what are the important rules. First, Gardul, my world, I have this idea of recreation and evolution. Recreation and evolution are essentially the way my world works. So the world was created, it evolves. When it is destroyed, it is then recreated. So it's this ever-ending circle, something I like to call the unity theory. All of the iterations of my world are unified. Similar souls, similar powers evolve and exist in the world. The next thing is about the universe. The elements of the universe are spread out when stars explode. So when you have a supernova or a nova and a star explodes, the elements from that star spread out, which is a very important concept to the way life evolves in my universe, not just on Gardul, but in the universe as a whole. Because life is caused by the elements that are present on a world. So life has a tendency to, against all odds, show up, whether or not it's even desired to be there in my universe. So if you go to worlds, especially Terra-style worlds, Earth-like worlds, you're very likely to run into life. And because of the similar elements present in similar quantities, it's very possible that the life will be very similar, not exactly the same, but it'll be very similar to other Terra-like worlds within this area of the galaxy at least. Now, as you get further out, because of different size of stars that explode for different reasons, obviously life when you get into the belts of the galaxies where there's more radiation are going to be different. However, it's about the elements and the conditions of the world. And the more similar the conditions and elements are, the more likely life is to be similar. Now, another important axiom for my game universe, my fantasy universe, is the speed of light is the maximum speed that particles larger than an atom can travel. I'm not getting into quantum physics, so I won't talk about really small particles. But for particles that we can kind of interact with, at least right now in our development, speed of light is the maximum speed things can go. And because of that, if I was to ever run stories or write stories in my universe that were space age, the fastest a spaceship could travel would be the speed of light. And theoretically, I don't think it could ever quite achieve that. However, I took this idea of cosmic strings, which are these things that physicists don't really understand and maybe have even been debunked by now. But my universe is tied together with giant cosmic strings. So you can actually enter and exit out of a cosmic string anywhere they go, creating wormholes. This will allow it to appear like you're traveling faster than light. You can cheat time and space that way. However, the ship itself can never exceed the actual speed of light. It will just appear to. However, it takes vast amounts of energy to be able to do this. It's not an easy task, nor is it meant to be. If you're not along a cosmic string outside of solar systems, my universe is very sparsely populated. The kinds of things out there would be extremely different than things that lie upon us. And now on a smaller scale, on a planet-side scale, there are tiny little strings that curse through my planets. Sometimes on Earth called ley lines, but there are these pockets of magic that can pool up. And for purposes of science, it's where a couple of these little strings connect on my world. And then along those strings, travel is possible along the world as well, utilizing the magic the same way you could travel between planets. However, once again, it's very expensive and not easy to do. These minor points on planets themselves are typically considered to be holy or magic sites by the people who live there. Very, very important places, not to be defiled. Sometimes cultures will actually very jealously guard those sites. Other times, they're left open and only visited when actual rituals are taking place. However, these are very important points, especially for cultures who know how to really use them. They're exceptionally important. And for cultures who don't really truly understand how to use them, they're still very important because at these spaces where the little cosmic strings lace through the planet, it is once again a place where people who know magic can tap into it easily. Cosmic string really just long pools of magic in my universe. However, remember, magic is not necessarily outside of the physicalness of my universe. It's part of it. And the other thing is major points that connect entire solar systems or galaxies together are never on a planet. That is a rule I have. You will not have a dimensional gate opening up, well, maybe a dimensional gate, but you won't have a gate opening up to another part of the universe and having societies collide that way. Because to get to one, they'd have to be out into space and they would exit out into space. So they would need to be able to travel in space to be able to utilize these things. Another important point in the evolution of my worlds, survival of the fittest does not mean the best version of something survives. It does not mean the strongest version survives. It means the version most able to exist in the current environmental conditions of the world is the one who will more than likely exist. Sometimes on its own. Sometimes the other one will die out. Sometimes it'll be killed off. It's irrelevant. The survival of the strongest for my universe means that it is the thing that is most likely to survive. And surviving does not mean winning. Your life is not better if you have outlived another life form on your planet. It just means that, hey, we're still around. We still have a chance to do something else. On an economic scale now, my universe, especially my world, where it's Earth-like, economics is ruled by this idea of human action. Human action is the economy is the sum of its parts. However, as economies grow and they get too large, there's so many parts. Every person is a little part in the economy. And the choices they make, the things they value, and this can vary culture to culture what that is. However, the things they value create the local economies, and ultimately, as the world evolves into a more modern world, a more global world, it will actually cause the global economy to happen. Now, don't get me wrong, governments will try and centrally plan economies. Sometimes they'll do good, sometimes they'll do bad. However, the point is, in my universe, economics is ruled by human action. And when I say human, that's in quotes. It could be elves, it could be any kind of species that live on my planet that is sentient. They all make choices, they all have their own values. That is what dictates the economy of my world. Magic, and I've kind of touched on this already, but magic is simply another rule of the universe. It is no different in my universe than physics or relativity. It is just a rule of the universe. It is not supernatural. It's not out of planar. It's not supernatural in the sense that only special creatures can do it. It's not granted by the gods, although I'll get more into that later. However, the biggest thing to understand is when you use magic in my universe, there is a cost. And I kind of believe this in general, and so this will show up throughout all my stories, is there's always a cost. And so the thing you have to remember is if there's always a cost, you using magic will have an effect on the world. The reason magic, which is part of the universe, does not dominate it is that the cost of magic prevents it from dominating. So essentially, there is a time cost, there is an energy cost to be able to use magic. Those things limit people's ability to take advantage of it. Now, they're clever. They'll try and find ways to work around it. Sometimes they're more successful than others. But ultimately, magic won't dominate because it's too expensive to use. If you solely rely on magic, you are going to be overwhelmed. Along the lines of magic for me is technology. The technology level of my first stories is actually taking place in the Iron Age. So this is sort of before medieval times. Societies are starting to form up now. With magic, there's a bit more movement and communications than there would be otherwise. So in some ways, it's going to seem a bit more evolved. However, in other ways, it's going to seem less involved than it should be, because the technology and magic make it seem as if maybe you're in the Middle Ages. And in some ways, you are, probably because of that. But their ability to manipulate actual technology and make tools is somewhere in the early to middle Iron Age Earth time. Magic in my world takes 4 forms: true magic, divine magic, casting magic, and spirit magic. Each is a little different, and when I get and talk more about magic later, I'll get into detail on what my 4 different types of magic are. That has nothing to do with people's casting or what the costs are. It has more to do with the way magic is created by individuals. This is simply a basic topic. This is something you should have for your world. You should probably review it once a quarter. When you decide to add something to your world, the thing I do is I look at the sheet and I see, does it break any of these rules? Or are there other rules I have to add in to make sense of this when I reach this topic again? So this is a basic topic. This is something you should have for your world. Create a binder for your world if you don't have one right now, and start with this page. What is your world? What's the name of the world? And what are the important rules of the world? And this document will get larger over time. And remember, if something you bring in breaks the rules, you need a way to make it either work, or you have to change exactly what happens to make it work so it fits within the scope of your world, so you will have that consistency that people will believe it. Now, the world-building task for the day is create your checklist. What is your world? What are your tasks? Very important thing to do. So just start now. It shouldn't take you very long to do it. You'll add to it over time. The thing is, you always want to be very leery as you add on to it that you don't change existing rules. You have to change the content that goes into the world to make it fit. Otherwise, you lose the consistency of it. Now, sometimes you can add an addendum rule that will make something make sense that wasn't possible before. However, it's very good to know these things, so when you add in new features to your world, it is explained by the rules. Even if you don't explicitly tell them, people are clever, they'll figure it out. The real world task for the day is, if you have pets, make sure to walk them or clean their litter as needed. Take some time preventively to keep your pets happy. When your pets are happy, they will love you more, and they will give you some interaction that you can enjoy beyond the fantastical realms of your mind. And now, the tease. The next episode are the basics broken down. And if you look at the mind map that I gave you through my newsletter, which is available on Gardul.com, Gardul.com, you'll see essentially what I'm talking about are the basic things. The basic things you need to have in place as you start building it. And this is when it gets really exciting, folks, because this is really when we start developing cultures and geography and all those interesting things that make a world a world. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com, to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.